Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful, real-life tales that inspire and touch the heart. Today, we have a story that demonstrates the incredible power of kindness and how one simple, selfless act can change the course of a life. This is the story of Emma Miller, a widow who gave away her last $20 to a stranger in need, never imagining how that act of compassion would come full circle 40 years later. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into this heartwarming journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story. It was 1982, and Emma Miller was just 34 years old when life threw her a series of cruel and relentless blows. A young widow with 3 small children, she found herself grappling with the harsh realities of raising a family on her own. After the sudden death of her husband, Robert, he had been a local police officer, a man of integrity, who had been killed while protecting a family from a home invasion. The town had honored him with a hero's funeral, but as Emma stood by the grave, holding the hands of her children, she quickly realized that medals and condolences couldn't fix the leaky roof over their heads or fill the empty stomachs of her growing children. It wasn't easy for Emma. She worked long hours at the local school as a secretary, earning just enough to make ends meet, but nothing more. Her house, once filled with the laughter of children and the warm aroma of home-cooked meals, was now a shadow of its former self. The yellow paint that Robert had carefully applied over the years was now faded, chipped, and peeling. The garden they had once lovingly tended together was now overgrown, a chaotic mess of weeds and thorns. But Emma couldn't bring herself to leave. Every crack in the walls and every worn step was a memory of better days, of when Robert was still there, when the world felt whole and hopeful. Despite the struggles, Emma was determined to do everything she could for her children. They had already lost their father, and she refused to let them feel the sting of poverty. She pinched pennies, cutting corners where she could, and sacrificed her own needs to ensure that her kids had what they needed. There was always enough for school lunches, even if it meant she skipped a meal herself. Emma was the kind of woman who would give away her last dollar, no questions asked, and she often did. At the corner market, Betty, the woman who ran the store, would often comment, "You'll give anyone the last of your money, even if it means your kids will have to eat peanut butter sandwiches for a week." Emma would smile and nod. It was simply who she was. A woman of deep compassion. Someone who knew what it was like to struggle but also knew what it meant to help others, even if it hurt her own pocketbook. It was on one cold, rainy evening that Emma's life would change. She was at Earl's gas station, counting out the grocery money she had scraped together that week, when she saw him. The stranger was soaked through, his clothes dripping with rain as he tried desperately to talk the clerk into giving him some gas. His words were frantic, urgent. "Please, I need to get back. It's important. I lost my wallet, but I'll mail you the money as soon as I can. Just let me get home." The clerk, however, was unmoved. "No money, no gas," he said flatly, without any hint of compassion. The stranger's shoulders slumped in defeat, and Emma could see the distress in his eyes. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't trying to pull a fast one. He was just a young man who had found himself in a desperate situation. Something in Emma's heart stirred. She knew what it felt like to be desperate, to feel like the world was against you. This man was someone's son, perhaps someone's brother, or even someone's husband, and despite his apparent distress, he was standing tall, trying to hold onto his dignity, just like Robert used to. She couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Not when she could help. Emma stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she reached into her purse. She had exactly $20 left, money she had intended to use for groceries, to feed her children for the next few days. But there was something about the stranger's desperation that touched her heart. And without a second thought, she handed him the $20. "Here," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Take it, just get where you need to go safely." The stranger hesitated, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Ma'am, I can't," he protested. "That's too much. You don't even know me." Emma smiled faintly. "Someone helped me once, when I was in need," she said. thinking back to the kindness of neighbors who had brought food after Robert's funeral. Just get home, that's all that matters. The young man's face softened, and he thanked her, his voice filled with gratitude. Emma watched as he turned and hurried out the door, clutching the money like a lifeline. She couldn't help but wonder if he would make it back. Would he get the gas he needed? Would he make it home? And as she drove back to her small house, she pushed the thought aside, focusing on the immediate concern, feeding her children. For the next week, they ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. And Emma never mentioned the $20 to them. She didn't need to. They were just happy to have something to eat. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, the sound of the rain tapping softly against the window. She wondered if she would ever see the stranger again. It wasn't important. She had done what she could. But little did she know, the kindness she had shown that rainy night would ripple through the years and change not only her life but also the life of the young man she had helped. The memory of that night faded over time, just like the yellow paint on her house. Emma went on, as mothers do, raising her children, taking care of the house, and giving what she could to those in need. But she never forgot that rainy night. And neither would the stranger. It had been 40 years. The years had come and gone, each one bringing its own challenges and joys, but also the quiet fading of memories that were once vivid. Emma Miller's life had continued, as it always did. Her children had grown up, each going their separate ways, and she had kept to her routine, managing her small house on her own. The roof still leaked, the steps still creaked, and the garden, though somewhat more manageable now, was still a reminder of her late husband's absence. But she had grown used to it, and so had the neighborhood. Time, as it always does, softened the sharp edges of the past. But one morning, as Emma was out on her front porch, trying to repair a railing that had become loose over the years, something strange happened. She heard the distant rumble of engines, the kind that weren't usually found in a small town like Riverdale. It grew louder, vibrating the ground beneath her feet. Her heart began to race. Was it a military convoy? The sound didn't match the usual hum of local traffic. It was different. Something felt off, and her mind began to race with possibilities. Her son, Tom, was in the army. Was something wrong? Had there been an accident? Was she about to receive the worst kind of news? Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the railing tighter, her heart thumping in her chest. She glanced down the street, and her breath caught in her throat. 3 massive military Humvees were turning onto her street, their tires crunching over the gravel. They were followed by trucks loaded with construction materials and other military vehicles. The sight was surreal, a sight that didn't belong in a quiet, sleepy town like Riverdale. Emma felt a strange chill as the vehicles drew closer, the ground beneath her trembling with their presence. Her first instinct was panic. Was Tom hurt? Had something happened to him? But before she could even move, the vehicles came to a halt right in front of her house. The engine noise died down, and there was a strange stillness that followed, as if the entire world had paused for a moment. The first man to step out of the lead vehicle was tall, dressed in a crisp military uniform, and despite the gray hair at his temples, there was an unmistakable authority in his posture. He moved with the confidence of someone who had seen much in his life, someone who had earned the respect of those around him. He looked at Emma, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the sight of her, standing there on the porch, her hands shaking, as she tried to understand what was happening. "Mrs. Miller?" he called out, his voice steady, but carrying an undercurrent of familiarity. Emma froze. She didn't know this man. She had never seen him before. But his voice, his presence, there was something about him that stirred something deep within her. Could he be? She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes?" Her voice cracked, the word barely escaping her lips. "I've been looking for you for a very long time," the man said, his expression softening as he drew closer to her porch. Emma's mind raced. Looking for her? Why? Who was he? Was this a mistake? Was someone in her family in trouble? Her eyes searched his face, looking for any hint of recognition. But there was none. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "Is something wrong?" Has something happened to Tom? Her voice wavered as the fear in her chest grew. The man smiled gently, a knowing smile, one that seemed to carry a weight of history behind it. No, ma'am, your son is fine, but I'm here about something that happened many years ago. Something that changed the course of my life. He took another step forward, and Emma's breath caught in her throat as recognition slowly began to form in her mind. There was a flash, a memory. Blurry and distant, but still clear enough to make her heart skip a beat. She thought back to that rainy night in 1982. To the desperate young man at the gas station. Her mind spun. Could it be? I'm General Mark Thompson, the man said, his voice softer now, as he stepped closer to her. And I'm here about the $20 you gave me all those years ago. Emma's legs went weak, and she sank down onto the porch step, her hands gripping the railing for support. You? She whispered, disbelief flooding through her. That was you? The general nodded. It was. And that night, your kindness changed everything for me. I was just a young Marine, soaked and desperate, trying to get home. But you gave me the money without a second thought. You didn't ask why, you didn't hesitate, you just helped me, and I never forgot it. Emma sat there, stunned, unable to process the enormity of what she was hearing. All these years, she had thought little of that night. She had given the stranger her last $20, but she never imagined that it would lead to something like this. Did you make it? She asked quietly, her voice trembling. Did you get home? The general's smile deepened, his eyes filled with a soft, reflective look. I made it back with 10 minutes to spare. I was deployed to Lebanon the next morning. That moment, the kindness you showed me, stayed with me. It taught me something that changed my life. Something that shaped the man I became. And with those words, Emma's life began to shift in ways she never could have imagined. The rain may have fallen that night, but from it, a seed of kindness had been planted, one that had grown into something far bigger than either of them had ever expected. As the days passed, Emma watched in awe as her home was transformed. The Marines worked tirelessly, from repairing her roof to fixing the crumbling steps on her porch. The garden, once overgrown and forgotten, was lovingly restored with new roses, just like the ones she and Robert had planted years ago. Even the faded yellow paint, the color of her wedding photo, was carefully scraped away and replaced with a fresh coat, making her house shine once more. Through it all, General Thompson remained by her side, ensuring everything was done with precision and care. The whole neighborhood had rallied behind her, offering support and pitching in wherever they could. Local businesses donated supplies, and even the mayor stopped by, hearing of Emma's kindness and the incredible gesture of the Marines who had returned to help. As Emma sat in her restored porch swing, gently swaying in the breeze, she reflected on the extraordinary journey her simple act of kindness had set into motion. She had never expected anything in return that rainy night in 1982. Yet now, decades later, her life was touched by a profound display of gratitude. She had helped a stranger in need, and in turn, he had brought an army of people to help her find her way home. General Thompson approached her one last time, holding out a small package. Inside was a new coffee can, painted in Marine Corps colors. We've started a fund, he explained, so you can keep helping others without it hurting you. With tears in her eyes, Emma realized that kindness, no matter how small, could echo across time and change lives in ways that no one could ever imagine. If you loved this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories.